Welcome back to Fighting Words. I'm Carissa Maxwell, joined as always by senior combat writer Andreas Hale, and once again by our good friend from MMAfighting.com, Mike Heck. Mike, thanks for joining us again. And of course, this week we are talking UFC 295 this Saturday, November 11th, live from Madison Square Garden on ESPN Plus pay-per-view. Now, after about 18 months away from the octagon, Yuri Prochazka will return to face Alex Pereira to reclaim that UFC light heavyweight belt that he never actually lost, but has been vacant. But that's not even the headline going into this fight. The original co-main event was supposed to be Jon Jones defending his heavyweight title versus Stipe Miocic. Now, Jon Jones, he injured himself while training, and that fight had to be rescheduled, or not even rescheduled, replaced with 2 weeks' notice. So now it'll be Tom Aspinall versus Sergei Pavlovich for the interim UFC heavyweight titles. So I got to ask, how much does losing Jon Jones on this pay-per-view affect the pay-per-view?
Ooh, a lot. For me, at least. That's what everybody was looking forward to, the return of Jon Jones. These MSG cards are always big, and they always have a lot of attention towards them. Don't get me wrong. I ain't mad at Yuri versus Alex Pereira. That is a banger of a fight. Do not get me wrong. But the mainstream appeal of Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic in what could be Jon's last UFC fight, who knows what he was going to do. That was the appeal. I'm also not mad at Sergei Pavlovich versus Tom Aspinall. But this is a hardcore fan's dream card. For the casual fan, it takes a little bit of meat off the bone. I really wanted to see Jon Jones versus Stipe. I'm still going to be watching, but I don't know, Mike. I don't know about you, but I feel like it loses a little bit of its luster for the normal UFC cards that happen at Madison Square Garden. They usually feel very, very big. This one's taken down a notch.
Yeah, like if this was in Anaheim or Phoenix, I don't think it's that big of a deal. But Madison Square Garden, this is one of the major pay-per-views for the UFC. They try to load this thing up and make it a very big deal. Have there been some stinker cards in MSG? You betcha there have been. I don't think this is at the bottom of the list, but it's probably in the middle. I understand that people spent a lot of money to watch Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic, mostly because we could have got a double retirement at Madison Square Garden. Jon Jones fighting at home, very big deal, one of the big stars in the sport, arguably the greatest fighter of all time, depending on what your metrics are. But I got to tell you, I am one of those hardcore fans. I was really not into Jon Jones versus Stipe. Like, I get it from a historical perspective and a star power perspective, but that fight just seems very uncompetitive to me. Like, I'm never going to count Stipe out of a fight, but I just feel like Jon just runs him over. We haven't seen Stipe. By the time Stipe fights again, it's going to be over 3 years since we've seen him get iced by Francis Ngannou. Now we get Sergei Pavlovich versus Tom Aspinall, which is a way more competitive fight. Doesn't have the casual appeal, doesn't pass the public's test. If I went and asked 100 people down the street at the grocery store who either of these guys are, I might get one person who knows one of them. But we get Alex Pereira versus Yuri Prochazka. And that fight, if you ask me about any fight even 2 months ago that I'm looking forward to the most for the rest of this calendar year, it is that one. It's going to be pure chaos. Yuri coming back. Like Carissa said, I don't think he vacated the title. I think he was nudged to kind of vacate the title by the UFC. But Alex Pereira could make some freaking history here. And this 11th pro fight could become a 2-division UFC champion on top of being a 2-division glory champion. This guy doesn't make any sense. He's already broken the rankings and the entire system as we know it. If he wins on Saturday, it's officially shattered. This guy has ruined everything in the best possible way.
Now, with Jon Jones' injury, he's not suspected to come back until next summer. So do you think it's fair that he's been bumped now to number 2 on the pound-for-pound ranking list behind Islam Makhachev?
No. I mean, just if you're going to just take him off for inactivity, do that. That's, in my opinion, it's really hard for me to put anybody ahead of Jon Jones. I know it's a what have you done for me lately business, but Jon Jones ain't lost a damn fight, and he's going to remain number 1 on my pound-for-pound list until further notice. And the fact that he's been bumped to number 2, and I don't know if that's just a consequence of the ranking committee, due to inactivity, whatever it is, it just don't feel right. I know Makhachev just beat Alexander Volkanovski, who was rolling off his couch on 10 days' notice and moving up in weight to fight the lightweight champion. To me, the best fighter in the world remains Jon Jones, and if you're going to remove him due to inactivity, do that. But to knock him down a notch, I don't know, man. It just feels kind of nasty to me.
Kudos to the UFC rankings panel for catching up to the only rankings that matter. That is the MMA Fighting Global rankings. We've had Islam Makhachev at number 1 after he beat Volkanovski. I had Makhachev at number 1. I had Makhachev and Volk ahead of Jon Jones, even after Jones came back and beat Cyril Gane. Do you want to know why, Andreas? Because Thiago Santos arguably lost that fight against a man with one leg. Dominic Reyes arguably lost that fight. The Anthony Smith fight, nobody wants to ever watch again because it wasn't good. And then after a 3+ year layoff, he beat Cyril Gane, who has 0 grappling, and it wasn't Francis Gane. Now, if he beats Francis, whole different story. But right now, the GOAT list and pound for pound are 2 different things. You mentioned, what have we done for me lately? Islam Makhachev has done a lot lately. He's not just beating dudes, he is icing dudes, and he just beat the pound for pound best fighter in a lot of people's minds with a head kick knockout. So right now it is Islam Makhachev. It's not Jon Jones. Kudos to the UFC rankings panel for actually getting something right.
Yeah, Mike, I love you, man, but it's really hard for me. Like, to all those points, to the what have you done for me lately industry. You're right? Like, Jon hasn't looked great in his last few fights, and then he mowed down Cyril Gane, as you said, doesn't have any grappling. It's just hard for me to do this with Islam after beating a Volk who, I mean, I don't want to make excuses for Volk because he don't make excuses for himself. But it is what it is. It was a smaller man who was fighting on a short notice and got head kicked to hell. I get it. I understand. I don't know, man. Jon Jones is still my GOAT, and he's still my number 1 pound for pound fighter in the world. It just, because of this is the reason why I'm concerned. If he was already number 1, if Islam was already sitting at number 1, I'd have no problems with it. But due to the injury, he moves down. That feels weird. But everybody has their own pound for pound list. It's a fictional list. We just make it up as we go along. So it's cool.
No, I agree with you there. Like, Islam should have just been number 1 after he beat Volk. Like, why did we wait? We had to wait for Jon to find out that he got injured and couldn't fight Stipe, and then you bump Makhachev up? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. But Makhachev should have just been one right after UFC 294 anyways. So it doesn't really matter. Jon has 1 win in 4 years. Once he gets another one, I think we have a whole different conversation. But again, and now he's going to be out for like 18 months again. So he's going to have like 1 fight in 5 years. This is crazy, dude.
It's nuts.
Just crazy.
Well, and Jones has made it very, very clear he wants to fight Stipe and only Stipe. And obviously now that fight does need to be rescheduled for who knows when. But now with the complication of all the belts, how is the UFC going to handle the winner of the Aspinall Pavlovich interim heavyweight title whenever with Jon Jones? Like, how is Jon Jones going to fight now for that title when all he wants is Stipe? How's the UFC going to handle that mess?
Dude, I don't know. Like, this is... In no universe do I see Jon Jones fighting Sergei or Tom Aspinall. I just don't see it. I don't think Jon is interested. I think Jon's at the point now where he wanted to fight Stipe and probably ride off into the sunset. But I don't even know if Stipe is going to be able to fight because, Mike, you mentioned it earlier. This dude's going to be like 100 years old by the time he gets back into the octagon. The luster is off of that fight, but I think it's Jon's world and Jon's going to do what Jon wants to do. There's a scenario where Jon just says, you know what, y'all can have this title and I'll just fight Stipe, because I just don't see the UFC forcing him to fight Aspinall and Pavlovich and Jon being like, cool, that's who I'll fight. He's going to want to fight Stipe. If Stipe wants to fight, it's only going to be against Jon Jones. He's not going to fight Almeida or Aspinall or Pavlovich or Blake. He ain't fighting any of those guys. So the interim title makes things a little bit complicated. I don't know exactly how they move from here, but it's all dependent on when Jon Jones comes back and if Stipe comes back next year. So I guess you got to put a title on somebody in the meanwhile, but Jon ain't fighting either of those dudes. Mike, do you think Jon's going to fight Aspinall or Pavlovich?
So if you asked me this before Jon was injured, I would have said absolutely not. If this fight had gone through this Saturday, headlining Madison Square Garden, I would have said no. Not like 100% no, because I think Aspinall, there's something there. But I think the layoff actually makes things a little bit more interesting. For those who want to see Jon fight more than one more time, I think you might get your wish here. Him being out another extended period of time, they are going to rebook the Stipe fight. By the way the calendar is all shaking out right now, I would guess that is going to headline International Fight Week. And then from Jon fighting in March to having to fight in November, I don't think he's just going to come out and say, I'm done. I think he might just hang out and see where Tom Aspinall goes. We've seen interim titles defended, And if Tom Aspinall beats Sergei Pavlovich, it's going to be a huge deal. People already like Tom. I think he's on the cusp of big things, and I think people are starting to get into him. And Sergei Pavlovich is just such a scary dude that if he just goes out and knocks out Tom Aspinall, but his grappling isn't tested at all, I think Jon might be like, maybe I could take this dude down because I'm a way better grappler than Alistair Overeem did. And we saw what Alistair did to Sergei Pavlovich on the ground. Now, I know time changes and people evolve, but we still have not seen Sergei's ground game since that Alistair Overeem fight. So I think Jon kind of milks this a little bit. I think he hangs out. And if Tom Aspinall wins the interim title, the UFC is going to try to go back to London. They're going to throw him in a main event to defend that title. And if he has a big star-making moment in the main event as an interim heavyweight champion against Almeida or Cyril Gane or somebody like that, and comes out looking like a star, I think Jon's going to come back and maybe take that fight. I think he maybe sees some dollar signs. Pavlovich, not so sure, but I think this delay might actually extend Jon's career maybe for another fight or two.
I'm very interested. Everything you said is true, Mike. Maybe there is something. I mean, Jon's a competitor, right? Like, I don't know what he has if he doesn't have the idea of fighting. I just don't know. Like, if Aspinall and Pavlovich somehow stink it up this weekend, I mean, I don't see it. 2023 has been a weird-ass year. Weird things have happened in the octagon all year. I wouldn't be surprised if somehow this wasn't a great fight. And Jon's like, I don't want to fight either of them. But to your point, if Aspinall somehow becomes a star out of this fight and has a nice little title defense, and Jon sees a reason where he's an attraction fighting an attractive opponent, I can see it happening. I don't know if he's going to fight Sergei Pavlovich no matter what, though. Like that's just a guy that's high risk, very low reward. I don't know if Jon necessarily wants to take that risk, but man, 2023 has been a funky ass year in MMA. That's all I gotta say.
For sure.
So you've hinted at who you think Jon would prefer to fight, but before we even get there, what are your predictions for the co-main event for Tom Aspinall versus Sergei Pavlovich for the interim heavyweight title?
Man, I'm picking Sergei Pavlovich. I just think this guy has been nuclear, like tearing people apart since Alistair Overeem. Neither of these guys get out of the first round, which is crazy. But the degree of difficulty, I hate doing MMA math, but I'm going to do it anyway. The degree of difficulty of Sergei Pavlovich's opponents and the people that he obliterated is a little bit more superior than Tom Aspinall. Granted, I think Aspinall has more dynamics to his striking and has a little bit better ground game. But I've seen Aspinall have some holes defensively that I think Pavlovich can expose. But I don't know who's going to win. I think both these guys can knock each other out. I'm just going to roll the dice here, and I'm going to go with Sergei. And I think this fight also doesn't get out of the first round.
Sing it with me, Andreas. Tommy Aspinall. Tommy Aspinall. Look, Tom Aspinall, I really wish he wasn't taking this fight on less than 2 weeks' notice. I wish he got a full camp for this one. I still think this fight's going to rule. And Tom Aspinall has already said it. I am not going to let this dude hit me. I'm just going to go in there and tackle this guy. And I really think that's obviously the best path to victory for him. I don't think he's going to try to stand with this dude at all. I think he's going to go in there, he's going to throw a leg kick, and he's going to tackle Sergei Pavlovich. And eventually, I think he's going to get a finish in the first round. I don't think Pavlovich is going to land that big shot. Wouldn't surprise me if he did. But Aspinall knows he's not going to be like Curtis Blades and be like, you know what? This dude's a big striker. Wait till you see how good my striking is against this guy. No, I think Tommy's going to understands the role here. He understands the job. He's going to tackle Sergei Pavlovich, and he's going to tap him in the first round. That's what I think is going to happen, and MSG is going to go bananas when that happens.
And let's not ignore the main event, which, of course, again, is Yuri Prochazka versus Alex Pereira for the interim light heavyweight title. What is your prediction for that fight? And do you think that the winner of that fight will be a champion this time next year?
I'm going to ask your second question first. No. This light heavyweight division has been cursed. Nobody can hold on to this damn title. But this Yuri Prochazka versus Alex Pereira fight is intriguing on so many levels. I think Mike outlined all of them. But it's Yuri, the layoff. How does he come back due to the layoff? How does he deal with Alex Pereira striking? How does Alex deal with Yuri striking? Does this fight ever hit the mat, or is this a glorified kickboxing match? I don't know what's going to happen. But I'm going to go with Yuri Prochazka for this reason. Alex Pereira fought Jan Blachowicz, and it was a close fight. Alex won. I don't know how well the power is going to carry at light heavyweight against somebody like Yuri. Granted, Yuri got stunned pretty badly by Glover Teixeira, who's 1,042 years old. Nevertheless, I think that Yuri's going to find a way to win this fight. If this fight somehow hits the canvas, it'll be really ugly. but I feel like Yuri has a little bit of an advantage there. I mean, he choked out Glover with like a minute left in the fight, which was amazing. Not saying he'll do that against Alex, but I'm curious how the conditioning goes for 5 rounds. I'm curious how Alex deals with counter striking. He got knocked out by Israel Adesanya, who is a smaller opponent. I'm going to go with Yuri. I think this is going to be a banger, though. I think we have 2 fights in the main and the co-main. There's going to be competing for fight of the night and performance of the night bonuses. Everybody else on the card, too bad. Mackenzie Dern, you better try to get your submission of the night quick because these two are going to gobble up all the bonuses. But I'm going to go with Yuri Prochazka to reclaim what he never lost and become the light heavyweight champion again, and then probably get injured, not have the title next year.
How dare you put that negative juju out into the universe, Andreas. By the way, Matt Frivola and Benoit Saint-Denis would like to have a discussion with you in terms of what could be the fight of the night. But yeah, at least it's on the main card, not buried on the prelims, and we'll have no chance of winning it. But I'm going with Alex Pereira, man. One, it's just, I don't know, it's just destiny. It's just destiny for him to break everything. And with this chaos in this division, has been since Jon Jones left it, there's only one man who can fix the chaos, and that's Mr. Chaos himself. That's Alex Pereira. Now, Yuri Prochazka, I'm not concerned about ring rust at all. This dude gets hurt, and then he locks himself in a dark room for 6 days and just collects his thoughts. And who knows what the hell's going on in that man's brain. He's absolutely insane. I love this fight. Going to the mat is going to make things very interesting. If Yuri shoots for takedowns, I wonder how Alex is going to work. Obviously, he's not known for his defensive grappling at all. However, he is side by side with Glover Teixeira. He's the Robin to Glover's Batman. I'm sure it's gotten better than we've seen in the past. However, Yuri has that chaos factor where he leaves his chin right out in the air. This isn't going to be a Sean Strickland Israel Adesanya fight where, you know, Strickland's coming badgering in and Izzy's looking for that big shot and just can't find it. Yuri's going to come in. He's going to leave that chin in the air, and Alex is going to have the opportunity to land a big right hand or land a big shot and just find that button. Use that killer instinct. Find a way to finish. So this fight's going to be incredible for as long as it lasts, but I do feel like you're giving Alex Pereira 25 minutes, who is going to be a gigantic light heavyweight. I still don't know how this dude got to middleweight in the first place, but I think 25 minutes, you give Alex Pereira an opportunity to find that button. I think he's going to find it for a guy who does have defensive deficiencies like Yuri has, but I can't wait for this fight. I'm so excited for it. May the best man win.
Yeah, may the best man win. Mike, I'm just going to ask you, because which fight lasts longer, this one or the co-main?
This one lasts longer. I think we get to round 2 here.
Yeah, I think so too. Might be a short night. The good thing for everybody in New York, if these main and co-main are short, even though the UFC's pacing sometimes is terrible, you get an early night. We never get those in the Garden fights. I always feel like everybody's up until 3 or 4 in the morning, but hopefully we get 2 finishes. I'm not the guy who wants to see 2 25-minute fights. I want to see people get knocked out relatively quickly so I can go have a drink and enjoy the rest of my night. So hopefully we'll have that.
Be more UFC, less PFL with the pacing.
Yeah.
Right there with you guys. Well, we'll see what happens Saturday night at UFC 295, streaming live on ESPN Plus pay-per-view. Mike, thank you again so much for joining the show. Like, subscribe, comment, all the things, and we will see you back here next week on Fighting Words.